We were walking from the car in the parking deck. It was a short walk to the media entrance at Mercedes-Benz Stadium to pick up our SEC championship credentials. It was a little bit cold outside, but nothing crazy, not too cold to where you can't tailgate. And Dean, Matt, and myself noticed something. It was kind of quiet. There wasn't a lot of buzz in the air. From the parking deck, you walk over, and Mercedes-Benz Stadium is kind of on the left, and to our right is that Home Depot backyard, that big tailgating area that they built when they built this new stadium for the Atlanta Falcons. And normally that's packed, and there's people playing cornhole, there's people tossing the football, there are cars everywhere, tailgating, there's tents, there's events going on. And that was pretty tame. That wasn't full. There was an overcast, but it wasn't raining. And I was just, we started talking, and I sit there, I'm wondering, and I'm like, well, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. We're walking into the SEC championship game. This is a game between Georgia, the team that wants to defend its honor in the conference as the best team in the SEC, against Texas, who's in its inaugural season in the conference and wants to show everyone that Desmond Howard was right in October, that there's a new sheriff in town. This is a huge matchup. This is a top 10 matchup between two of the biggest brands in college football in Atlanta, in the heart of college football, in one of the nicest venues in the sport, college and pro. And it wasn't packed outside. There wasn't a buzz in the air. See, I'd been to the previous 3 SEC championship games. Georgia, Alabama in 21. Georgia, LSU in 22. Georgia, Alabama in 23. And I know it's a huge game. People are nervous. People are excited. People treat it for what it is. A game with a trophy on the line. Yet there wasn't that buzz. I say all this to say the conference championships still matter. And this is the truth about the SEC championship. It doesn't matter how many changes they make to the college football playoff. It doesn't matter if there's a bye or not on the line. This SEC championship game has not been devalued. And the conference championship games, I don't think they've been devalued. That's my take on this. But I just went to the last SEC championship game, and it just felt like people didn't care about it as much. Why? Texas and Georgia already had their tickets punched to the college football playoff. But there was still a ton at stake. Bragging rights, a trophy, and a bye. Yet the stadium wasn't completely full when it kicked off. The crowd didn't really go crazy until the third quarter when Gunnar Stockton gets out there and starts making plays. It was the Georgia crowd that goes crazy. Obviously, closer to Athens, they dominate the crowd a little bit. But it didn't feel like an SEC championship game for a long time. Insiders have told us that the Big Ten championship between Penn State and Oregon was that way as well, as both of them had their tickets punched to the bigger dance. This is a problem. These conference championship games matter. They are huge games. Kirby Smart would tell you, he's adamant, specifically with the SEC championship, that it's one of the great events in sports. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post had that little monologue to open this up, to just kind of set the scene for what it was like. And I can compare it because I've been to the last 4 SEC championship games. The most recent one wasn't the same as the others. Those other games felt the same as college football playoff games. Because guess what? I've been to a handful of those over the last few years too. This past one didn't feel that way at all. It didn't. It felt like I was walking into an October game between Georgia and Vanderbilt. That's what it felt like. And I worry, why... Now that I had to gather my thoughts there for a second. Now that the College Football Playoff Committee has unanimously moved the seeding format, they've changed it to where it's straight seeding, which I agree with. This needed to happen. The top 4 teams should be the 4 teams that get playoff byes, not the top 4 highest rated conference champions like we saw a year ago. But here's the thing about the SEC championship, about the Big Championship, and about the other power conference champions. Typically, those teams are going to be top 4 teams anyway. Last year was kind of an uncommon example where The top 4 teams heading into the college football playoff was 1 Oregon, Big Ten champion, 2 Georgia, SEC champion, 3 Texas, SEC championship loser, 4 Penn State, Big Ten championship loser. And part of that is because we get a unique playoff committee every year ranking them. And we saw the values that last year's playoff committee had, and most of us thought that they were pretty flawed. But last year's ranking in the top 4 heading into the playoff wasn't typical. And to be honest, I don't know that we would have seen that be the top 4 if this was the 14 playoff, where they prioritized trying to get a couple more conference champions in there. So, is the SEC championship devalued now that there's no bye on the line? That now there's even less on the line? No. Why? It has been since 2005. That's the last time the SEC champion wasn't one of the top 4 teams heading into the postseason. And it was Georgia in 2005. Since then, there's been Florida, national champions. LSU, national champions. 2008, Florida, national champions. 2009, Alabama, national champions. And this is in the BCS era where you got to be ranked 1 and 2. Auburn, national champions. LSU lost the national championship. 2012, Alabama, national champions. 2013, Auburn lost the national championship. 2014, first year of the college football playoff, Alabama makes the playoff. Top 4 teams. 15, Alabama makes the playoff. 16, Alabama makes the playoff. 17, Georgia makes the playoff, loses the national championship to Alabama, another SEC team who made the top 4. 18, Alabama loses to Clemson. 19, LSU wins the whole thing. Bama 20 wins the whole thing. Bama 21 loses to Georgia, who was in the SEC championship with them. 22, Georgia. 23, Alabama makes the college football playoff, the 14 playoff. 2024, Georgia, the first time with the expanded playoff, and Georgia is ranked number 2, and they would have been ranked number 2 anyway. They weren't just the number 2 seed. The college football playoff committee actually ranked Georgia number 2. So, it's been almost 20 years since the SEC champion wasn't one of the top 4 teams. A playoff bye is almost certainly going to be on the line in the SEC championship game. That notion probably hasn't changed. I did this exercise with the Big Ten as well. In the last it's been since 2018 that has happened, right? So we're talking about like the last 6 or 7 years. So that's not a recent issue for the Big Ten. The ACC champion made a good bit of the top 4 college football playoff rankings, right? Clemson. Florida State makes it. Big 12 champion made it a few times. So this is not something that is a huge problem. Specifically for the SEC, you can also book the Big Ten in there as well. Now you got Oregon in that conference, Washington in that conference. It's, one of the conferences that's almost considered a mega conference. And these conference championships matter, all right? The ACC championship last year, it's Clemson versus SMU. SMU the committee told us they're not really going to punish people for losing the conference championships. Well, SMU could have potentially earned a playoff bye. They lose. They're still in the playoff. But Clemson, who wasn't a top 12 team, they needed that conference championship to make the college football playoff. That could happen again this year. Or that could happen for Miami, whoever wins the ACC. Boise State, obviously winning their conference championship mattered, and they get their playoff bye. For Arizona State, they were a borderline top 12 team, along with the team they played in Iowa State. The winner of that game was getting in. The loser was not getting in. So, to me, saying these SEC championships, these conference championships have been devalued, I just don't agree with that. I don't agree with that statement. I don't think that's true. And I think that these games matter a lot, and they're really important to the history of college football. And especially with the SEC championship, a lot of the champions were the SEC champions. A lot of the national champions were the SEC champions. Excuse me. And it was amazing to me that the buzz in the air just didn't feel like it was a real conference championship game when I was at Georgia versus Texas. especially when you're thinking, hey, look, Texas has an opportunity to avenge a loss. Georgia went to Austin, went to Texas' home turf, and pretty much embarrassed them on a defensive level. Embarrassed them. I would have been embarrassed if I was Texas that day. Just like Georgia should have been embarrassed the way they lost Ole Miss last season and Notre Dame last season, right? And now Texas has an opportunity to say, hey, we're going to win the SEC championship the first year that we get here. And look, it goes to overtime. It was an incredible second half, a lot of drama, a lot of quarterback drama, and it ends up feeling like an SEC championship game towards the end. But it didn't feel that way going in for multiple reasons. People feel it's valued. There are more games later on. There are more tickets to pay for, right? If you're one of those fans that goes to every game, oh, well, there could be a home and home game, and then there could be a quarterfinal and a semifinal and a national championship to pay for, and I understand that, but it doesn't mean that the SEC championship and the Big Ten championship and all these other conference championships don't matter. They do, and that's the truth about them. Appreciate you for watching.